Catherine Doyle rode at the front of the herd, with dust on her boots and wind in her face. The Texas Panhandle lay flat and wide around her, but the hills near Dry Fork rose like a rough wall ahead. Behind her, two hands kept the cattle moving. Sam Ortega rode on the left side. Ben Carter rode on the right. The herd was big and tight, about 200 head, and all of them were headed for the railhead at Canadian before the week was out. Catherine checked the sky again. Dark clouds were building in the west. They were not yet over her, but they were coming fast. "We need Dry Fork before dark," she said. Sam looked up and nodded. "If we miss it, we lose time." "We don't have time to lose," Catherine said. That was the truth. The cattle had good weight, and the buyer at Canadian had promised to pay fair if they arrived on time. If they got stuck in the hills, the whole drive would slow down. The railroad would not wait. The buyer would not wait. Catherine had spent the summer on the trail, and she would not let a storm take the profit at the end. The herd moved on, hooves thudding soft in dry dirt. Then the ground dipped, and Dry Fork opened in front of them. Catherine pulled her horse to a stop. A fence ran straight across the only safe pass. It was new. The posts were fresh cedar, still pale where the wood had been cut. The wire shone in the last light. It was barbed wire stretched tight from one side of the narrow gap to the other. There was no gate. Catherine stared for a second, not trusting what she saw. "Well, I'll be," Ben said. A lead steer came up to the fence, sniffed it, and jerked back. Another cow pushed in close behind him. The whole front of the herd began to bunch. Cattle did not like wire. They did not like strange smells. They liked to move as one, and once they stopped, they could turn ugly fast. Catherine climbed down and walked to the fence. The wire was tight and clean. Someone had put it up very recently. She looked left and right. The hills closed in on both sides, rough with rock and brush. The pass through Dry Fork was the easy way. It was the only way that would not wear the cattle out before morning. She heard Ben ride up behind her. "Can we go around?" he asked. Catherine shook her head. "Not and keep the herd whole." A low roll of thunder sounded far off. Sam pointed down the slope. "There's that wash south of here. It's narrow, but maybe it'll take them." Catherine followed his hand. She could see the wash cutting through the land like a dry scar. In rain it would turn slick and mean. But in clear weather, it might hold the cattle if they moved slow. She was about to answer when she saw a horse on the rise to the east. A man was riding toward them. He came down easy, like he knew the ground well. He was broad-shouldered, with a hard face and a gray hat pulled low. His horse was a bay with a white sock on one front leg. When he got near enough, Catherine knew him. Amos Vance. He owned the spread on the other side of Dry Fork. "You found my new fence," he said. Catherine kept her voice steady. "You put it across the pass." Amos's eyes went to the cattle behind her, then back to her face. "It's my land. That pass is the safe way through. Not for every herd that wants to cross it." The first cold drops of rain tapped Catherine's hat brim. She looked at the wire again. Her lead steer had taken 3 steps back. The herd was pressing in tighter. One heifer tossed her head and blew hard through her nose. The sound made the rest shift and shuffle. Catherine turned back to Amos. "I need a gate. Right now." He folded his arms. "Not tonight." Then you're asking me to risk 200 head on a wash in the dark. I'm asking you to go around my place like everybody else. Catherine laughed once, but there was no humor in it. There is no around that won't cost me half the night. Maybe more. A deeper rumble of thunder rolled over the hills. The sky to the west had gone from gray to black. Amos glanced at the clouds, then at the herd. He had the look of a man who had made up his mind and did not want to change it. But even he could see the cattle crowding close to the fence now. One young steer pushed forward too hard. His shoulder brushed the barbs. He jerked back with a sharp ball. A thin line of blood showed along his hide. That was enough to make the rest shift again. "Move," Catherine snapped. She swung onto her horse. "Ben, take the rear. Sam, get on the left. Turn them south into the wash. Slow and easy. Don't let them break." Ben looked at the narrow cut in the ground. "That thing's tight. Tighter than this fence," Catherine said. "Go." Sam gave a sharp nod and rode off. Catherine faced Amos one more time. "If your fence gets broken, you can talk to me in the morning. Right now, my cattle matter more than your wire." Amos's jaw tightened. "You break it, you pay for it. If the herd goes down in that wash, I may not have anything left to pay with." She did not wait for his answer. She rode back to the herd and threw her voice wide and strong. "Easy now. South, boys. South!" The herd began to move. Ben and Sam worked both sides, using their horses like walls. Catherine rode at the point, turning the lead steer away from the fence and down toward the wash. The cattle did not want to go there. The ground was steep at the edge, then narrow, then full of loose rock. But they wanted the wire even less. The first ones dropped into the wash. Then the rest followed, one after another. The wash was not empty. Brush grew along the sides. Stones shifted under hoof. A calf slipped and fell on her side, and Catherine leaped from the saddle to pull her back up before she was trampled. The calf came up shaking, then ran after her mother. Rain began in small cold drops. It hit the dust and made the air smell sharp and clean. Then the drops grew harder. The herd moved in a long, dark stream through the wash. Catherine rode along the edge, her horse picking careful steps on the slanted bank. She could hear the cattle breathing, the wet slap of mud under hoof, the sharp calls of the hands. Thunder cracked closer now. The sky flashed white over the hills, and for 1 second the whole country looked bright and hard as day. In that light, Catherine saw Amos again. He was still near the fence, watching them move. He had taken off his hat and was holding it low against the rain. He looked less sure now. He could see what she saw. If the cattle lost their footing in the wash, they would pile up. If one of them stampeded, they would all stampede. And if the storm broke hard, the wash could fill fast. The herd slowed at a bend where the walls grew steeper. The led steer stopped and swung his head. The cattle behind him pushed. The whole line began to bunch. "Keep them moving!" Catherine shouted. Ben rode up the right side and slapped his hat against his leg. Sam whooped once and swung wide on the left. Catherine moved ahead, leaned low in her saddle, and pointed her horse's nose into the bend. "Come on," she said, loud and calm. "Just keep coming." The steer stepped forward. Then another flash lit the sky, and a peal of thunder rolled so hard it seemed to shake the ground. The herd jumped. A cow near the middle swung sideways and knocked into two others. The line broke. Hooves slid. One animal slipped down into the mud and nearly took three more with her. Catherine swore under her breath and rode straight into the mess. She grabbed a loose rein, pulled her horse around, and drove his shoulder against the side of the cattle. Sam came in from the left. Ben pressed from the right. The herd felt the horses and turned back into the wash. They did not like it, but they moved. The rain got harder. It ran down Catherine's neck and made her shirt stick to her back. The mud climbed higher on her boots. Her hat brim drooped, then held water. Still she kept at it. Half an hour later, maybe more, the wash started to rise again toward level ground. Catherine saw the line of the hills open ahead. Beyond them lay the last stretch to Canadian. And there, on the far side of the wash, was another fence. This one was lower, but it still cut across the path. Amos Vance had closed off both sides of the pass. Catherine rode up to the bottom of the slope and stopped. Amos was there again, this time on foot, leading his horse by the reins. He had a lantern in one hand and a pair of wire cutters in the other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain beat on the tin side of the lantern and hissed in the dark. Catherine knew then that he had come down to stop her if he had to. Or maybe to see if she would crash his fence after all. "You put up a second line," she said. Amos looked past her at the herd, now muddy and tired, but still together. "I didn't think you'd come through the wash. I didn't think you'd be foolish enough to block both ends of the pass." He did not answer that. The cattle pressed behind her, close enough that she could feel their heat in the rain. "Move that wire," she said. Amos held the cutters, but did not raise them. "You think I set this because I wanted to cause you trouble? I think you set it because you wanted to keep everyone else's cattle off your grass." That, too. He wiped rain from his face with the back of his wrist. "But I also thought the old trail was empty. I didn't know you were coming this way tonight. We told your man in town we were driving north." I was not in town. Catherine let out a hard breath. She wanted to shout at him. She wanted to take the cutters from his hand and slice the wire herself. But the cattle would not wait for anger. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a folded paper. It was damp, but still readable. She had kept it there for 2 months. "This is the survey copy," she said. "The county clerk gave me a copy in Borger. Dry Fork Passage is marked clear. The line does not run where you think it runs. End." Amos took the paper and held it under the lantern. His face changed as he read it. The rain ran off the brim of his hat and onto the page. He read it once, then again. When he looked up, his mouth had gone tight. "I thought the post line was farther east," he said. "It isn't." The cattle behind Catherine began to crowd again. One of the younger hands called out in a worried voice. Amos looked at the herd, then at the wire, then at the dark sky. Another flash of lightning broke above them, bright enough to show the whole fence line in silver. At last he said, "Hold your horse." He stepped to the nearest post, set the cutters on the lower wire, and worked fast. The metal snapped with a sharp sound. Then he cut the next strand. Catherine rode forward at once, and Ben and Sam moved in behind her. "Hold the line," Catherine said. She swung down, took the loose wire in both hands, and lifted it clear of the cattle's path. Amos grabbed the post rope to keep the fence from falling into the wash. Rain ran off all of them now in streams. Lightning lit the scene again. Catherine bent low, bracing the wire with her shoulder. Amos on the other side, jaw set, rain shining on his face, the cattle behind her like a dark wall, the hills cut sharp against the sky. It would have made a hard picture for any man who wanted to know what the West looked like when a storm was coming and there was no room left to be wrong. Then the led steer stepped through. After that, the rest followed. The herd pushed out of the wash and into the open ground beyond the fence. Once clear, they spread a little, then settled back into their long moving line. Catherine mounted again and drove them on. For a while no one spoke. The rain kept falling, but the worst of the storm passed east of them. The cattle were tired now, but they were whole. That was enough. Ben rode up beside Catherine and gave a long breath. "I thought we were done for." "Not yet," she said. Sam laughed softly, the kind of laugh a man gives when the fear is starting to leave him. "I don't ever want to see another fence like that." "You will," Catherine said, "but maybe not tonight." They moved north through the night. The ground got flatter. The wind eased. By the time the gray edge of dawn came up in the east, the lights of Canadian showed ahead like a small line of fire. The railhead was busy, even at that hour. Men came out of the stock pens with lanterns. A buyer in a wet coat stood by the loading chute and counted the herd with a quick eye. Catherine gave him the number, then gave it again when he asked. Her voice was rough from the long night, but steady. 206, she said. All accounted for. The buyer nodded and started his count. Catherine sat in her saddle for one long moment before she climbed down. Her legs shook when they hit the ground. She had to stand still and breathe until the world stopped swaying. Then she heard hoofbeats behind her. She turned and saw Amos Vance riding in with one hand on the reins and a coil of loose wire hanging from his saddle horn. He looked tired, wet, and far less hard than he had the night before. He stopped near her and lifted the coil a little. "I'm going to move that fence back," he said. "And I'm putting in a gate." Catherine looked at him. "Good." He nodded once. "You were right about the line." "I know." That might have ended it there. Instead, Amos glanced toward the pens, where the cattle were being pushed toward the loading chute. "You made time," he said. "We did." He looked at the sky, where the storm clouds were gone and the sun was rising over the flat land. "You got lucky." Catherine's mouth twitched, almost into a smile. "No," she said. "I got cattle through a bad place. That's not luck. That's work." Amos gave a short nod as if that answer suited him. The buyer called out from the pens, and the cattle began to move toward the cars. The metal rails clanged. The smell of wet hide, mud, and coal smoke filled the air. Catherine stood there for one more minute and watched the herd go in. They had made it. Not by much, and not clean. But they had made it. Behind her, the new day was brightening over Dry Fork. The storm was gone. The wire had been cut. And by noon, before the sun could get too hot, Amos Vance would have a gate where the fence used to be.